Unlocking hidden quantum abilities through visualization is in fact a return, not to the past but to the silent point within you that has always known how to influence what surrounds you. Since childhood, there were moments when the simple act of imagining seemed to move the world, small coincidences that responded to your inner images. Over time, this power fell asleep under the weight of haste and doubt, but it was never lost. The quantum field continues to mirror every vibration you emit, waiting only for you to truly see again. To visualize is to reopen that channel, to transform sensation into language, intention into form. When that memory awakens, reality ceases to be something that happens to you and becomes something that happens from you. At this point, the boundary between the internal and the external begins to dissolve. What once seemed like chance reveals itself as response, and every event gains a tone of coherence that previously went unnoticed. It is here that the field shows its true nature. It is an invisible mirror, reflecting not what you wish for, but what truly vibrates within you. It is not about positive thinking or forcing pleasant emotions. The quantum field does not negotiate with words. It recognizes vibrational patterns. If there is harmony between what you imagine and what you feel, the reflection is clear and fluid. If there is dissonance, the mirror becomes cloudy. The universe neither punishes nor rewards, it simply replicates. It returns the same frequency that your body and mind sustain together. Therefore, to understand the field is to understand yourself in depth, not as an idea, but as a living frequency. Imagine for a moment that every emotion you feel is a wave. It propagates in all directions, meeting other similar waves, and together they form a pattern. That pattern is what the field reads. Thought gives form, but emotion gives strength. When you visualize something, the first impulse is mental. It creates an image, a scene, a possibility. But if that image does not find an emotional counterpart, it does not stabilize. It is like throwing a seed into the wind. Without vibrational soil, it does not take root. The field mirrors what you sustain coherently. This explains why certain desires never materialize, even when you think about them every day. Thinking is only half of the emission, feeling is the other half. When thought and feeling move in different directions, the field receives a confused signal and reflects it with the same incoherence. The result is a fragmented reality, full of beginnings without conclusion, opportunities that appear and disappear, relationships that repeat unresolved patterns. There is a turning point when you begin to realize that nothing outside of you needs to change for something to change. Transformation begins the moment you recognize your vibration as the cause and no longer as the consequence. This perception is not theoretical, it is experienced in the body. When you sustain an internal image with sincere and calm emotion, something physically changes. The breathing reorganizes, the heartbeat adjusts, the body temperature slightly shifts. The entire body acts as a translator between the mind and the field, emitting signals that the universe effortlessly understands. Many try to control the field through the force of intention, as if it were an entity to be commanded. But the field does not obey orders, it responds to coherence. The more you try to force an outcome, the more noise you create. The vibration of haste is the same as that of fear, and fear interrupts resonance. That is why true mastery does not come from trying to manipulate, but from aligning. And aligning is an act of listening, not of imposition. When the field becomes a conscious mirror, you begin to observe with a different eye. Circumstances cease to seem like obstacles and become indicators. If something does not flow, it is a direct reflection of an internal frequency that needs adjustment. Life begins to function as constant, precise, and compassionate feedback. Each situation is a response, and each response contains a key to the next level of coherence. It is common at this stage for a certain strangeness to arise. If everything reflects what I vibrate, where do I end and where does the world begin? This question has no mental answer but can be felt. The field is simultaneously internal and external. It is not outside of you because you compose it. And it is not only inside because the inside and the outside intertwine. You are both the mirror and the reflection, the emitter and the return. This understanding changes the way you look at the simplest experiences. A glance, a conversation, a seemingly small decision, everything becomes a reflective surface. When you begin to perceive the world this way, daily life gains a new texture. Each event is read not as coincidence, but as language. The field speaks in synchronicities, in subtle repetitions, in bodily sensations that indicate harmony or misalignment. It is possible to train this way of seeing. The first practice is to observe without judging what returns. If the same type of situation repeats itself, it is a vibrational echo, not to blame yourself, but to adjust the emission. It is a process similar to tuning an instrument. You don't force the right sound. You simply listen to the error and turn the string until you find the exact tone. The same happens with the field. When you adjust the internal tone, the reflection changes effortlessly. Over time, this constant observation generates a kind of intimacy with your own field. You begin to feel when something is in coherence, even before acting. Decisions become more precise, time seems to reorganize in your favor, and life gains an almost imperceptible fluidity, as if the air between things responded to your presence. This is not mysticism. It is the natural consequence of the harmony between perception, emotion, and vibration. The greatest subtlety of this process is realizing that the field does not distinguish between the real and the imagined. It responds to vibrational density, not to appearance. Therefore, when you visualize something with total emotional presence, you are already emitting the signature of that reality. The field begins to reorganize probabilities around you to reflect that new information. It is as if the mirror began to bend, adapting to the shape you sustain with your feeling. But there is an essential detail. The reflection only remains as long as you remain in it. If doubt enters, the mirror breaks. Doubt is a vibration of cancellation, a rupture in emission. That is why the training of presence is the foundation. It is not about blind belief, but about remaining coherent even when results are not yet visible. Confidence is the vibrational state that keeps the mirror stable until the new image fully manifests. When you reach this level of observation, life becomes a sequence of subtle responses. Everything communicates, everything returns, everything mirrors. And in this continuous dialogue, creative consciousness is born. The understanding that there is no separation between the observer and what is observed. The field is you, and the mirror only reflects what already exists in your vibration. It is from this consciousness that visualization takes on a new meaning. It is no longer a mental exercise or a technique to obtain results. It is a language, a silent idiom that the universe understands precisely because it is spoken through vibration. The mind speaks, but the field feels. The mental image is only the first trace, the initial sketch of a much deeper message that is only completed when the body and emotion become part of the emission. To visualize is not to imagine a future, it is to summon a frequency. Every image you project within yourself is a note within a greater vibrational composition. The universe does not translate words, it translates states of being. Therefore, when you think of something with desire but feel fear or lack, the field does not capture the content of the thought, but the predominant vibration of the emotion. It is the feeling that gives density to the image, that makes it tangible within the quantum web. The communication between mind and field is analogous to music. Thought creates the melody, emotion defines the tone, and the body is the instrument that vibrates. When there is harmony, the sound propagates clearly and the field responds coherently. When there is noise, the frequency scatters and the return comes fragmented. Learning to visualize is, therefore, learning to play your own field, to hear the inner sound that precedes any external manifestation. This type of visualization does not depend on effort or forced imagination. It happens on the border between thinking and feeling, where images cease to be merely mental and become sensory. When the scene you create begins to have texture, temperature, sound, even scent, when the body recognizes it as real, communication is established. The field responds to the reality that is felt, not to the mental hypothesis. Many believe that visualizing is controlling the future, but it is the opposite. It is tuning into the version of reality that already exists in potential. The inner image does not create something that did not exist. It merely selects among infinite possibilities the one that corresponds to your most coherent vibration. It is like changing the channel on a radio. The signal was always there, but only becomes audible when there is tuning. The difficulty lies in sustaining the image without forcing it. The mind wants immediate results, wants proof, wants to ensure that it is working. But the field does not respond to anxiety. It responds to consistency. Visualizing is like planting a seed. Each time you return to that image with presence and serenity, you are watering the field with coherence. And just as in nature, there is an invisible gestation time between the unseen and the seen. The rational mind usually resists this process, for it seeks linearity, cause, effect, chronology. But the field operates through resonance, and resonance is non-linear. You can emit a frequency today that will only find its reflection weeks later, when the vibrational environment is ready to mirror what was sent. This temporal delay confuses the ego, but it is in it that one measures how much trust has already replaced control. The secret lies in cultivating a state of living observation. When you visualize something and the body reacts, with slight warmth and expansion in the chest, a calm that does not come from the mind, it is a sign that the field has been activated. The universe begins to reorganize, not in obedience to your desire, but in resonance with your vibration. It is a silent but real movement, like the seed that germinates beneath the soil before breaking through to the surface. To visualize is also a way of remembering what is possible. By creating an image and sustaining it with genuine feeling, you offer your body an experience of the future before it happens. The brain registers this experience as real, and the physiology begins to align with it. Hormones, heartbeats, neural patterns, everything adjusts to sustain the new frequency. The field perceives this alignment and responds by amplifying the information. This is how the invisible begins to organize itself toward the concrete. But this communication does not sustain itself through initial enthusiasm alone. It is necessary to listen to the return. Each time a situation, person, or opportunity appears, observe what it mirrors. It is the field responding to the emission. If the reflection still carries traces of fear or limitation, it is not failure, it is fine-tuning. The field returns what is ready to be purified. Thus, visualization becomes a continuous process of vibrational refinement, not a method of controlling reality. The beauty of this dialogue is that it requires no belief, only presence. The more aware you become of what you feel while visualizing, the clearer the field becomes. It is not a distant mechanism, but a natural extension of consciousness. It is the invisible part of the same organism, responding to the quality of the energy you sustain. When the mind understands this, the weight of making it work dissolves. Visualization ceases to be an exercise of will and becomes a form of communion. The universe is not something to be convinced, but something to be remembered. And every true remembrance happens in the body, not in words. At this point, the practice becomes simple. Close your eyes not to escape the world, but to feel the field within it. Each breath becomes a translation, each sensation a word, each heartbeat a signal. Silence comes to be understood as the pause where the universe responds, and you begin to perceive that, even before thinking, the field already knows what you are. To visualize, then, is not to ask, but to communicate. It is the oldest dialogue of existence, consciousness and creation conversing in the same language, without sound, without time, without distance. The mind speaks, the field feels, and together they build what we call reality. But within this dialogue so pure, there are almost imperceptible noises that distort the message before it even reaches the field. They are micro-vibrations of doubt, impatient expectations, subtle little negations that interrupt the flow before it becomes form. Most of them arise silently, between one thought and another, and it is in this interval that the blockage sets in. These blockages are not opposing forces, but interruptions of coherence. They occur when the mental image is created, but does not find firm emotional soil to rest upon. You may even see the scene you desire, but something inside you does not fully believe it. This microscopic hesitation is already enough for the field to receive a confused message, a mixed signal that says yes and no at the same time. The universe, obedient to vibration, simply reflects indecision. Doubt is the subtlest noise of the field. Not healthy doubt, which questions and investigates, but the doubt that fragments creative energy. It disguises itself as prudence, but it is fear. Fear of being naive, of being frustrated, of not deserving. It is an inherited fear, learned in living with the visible world, which insists on teaching us that only the concrete is real. But the field does not respond to the logic of the concrete. It feeds on what is felt as true. When the mental image is born from doubt, it does not vibrate enough to be perceived by the field. It goes out like a spark that finds no oxygen. That is why so many visualizations seem not to work. It is not a lack of technique, it is a lack of vibrational coherence. The mind says, I want, but the body responds, I don't believe. And since the body is the antenna of consciousness, it is what the field hears first. If you observe carefully, it is possible to notice the exact moment the image unravels. It is when thought mixes with the memory of failure, when the initial enthusiasm is diluted in comparison, when expectation generates tension in the chest. This is the instant when energy ceases to flow and begins to spin around itself. The vibration loses direction. The first step to dissolving this blockage is to recognize that it is not an enemy, but a messenger. Each doubt brings with it information about what still needs to be integrated. When something inside you resists believing, it is a sign that part of your consciousness still vibrates at an old frequency, perhaps a memory of loss, a habit of control, a learned distrust. Instead of fighting it, observe. Feeling the blockage is the first act of release. The field does not demand vibrational perfection. It responds to authenticity. A genuine emotional state, even if vulnerable, has more creative strength than an artificial attempt at positivity. When you accept what you feel and include it in the visualization, the energy begins to circulate again. It is as if the mirror, previously fogged, began to reflect once more, now without filters. True visualization does not avoid fear, it integrates it. It allows it to be present, but not in command. Consciousness observes, embraces, and continues to emit the scene with serenity. This creates a different kind of vibration, one that contains depth. It is the sign of energetic maturity, when you do not need to eliminate the noise to sustain the frequency, but can keep it stable even amid interference. There is also another, subtler type of blockage, attachment to the result. When the mind fixes on how and when something must happen, it tries to control the quantum flow with linear logic. This tension creates a vibrational knot that the field reads as resistance. Attachment imprisons energy within a single path, preventing the universe from operating through broader and more unexpected routes. Letting go of control is not giving up. It is trusting the intelligence of the field. It is recognizing that the role of the observer is to sustain the vibration, not dictate the form. The universe does not move by coercion, but by correspondence. When you relax the desire and keep only the feeling of already being what you seek, the field gains the freedom to reflect that vibration in the most harmonious way possible. Over time, you begin to feel when you are blocking the flow. It is a bodily sensation. The air seems denser, the breath shortens, the gaze loses its brightness. These are signs that the mental image has drifted away from the original emotion. In such moments, simply return to present, take a deep breath, and recreate the scene without haste, letting the body feel again. The vibration re-establishes, and the field returns to alignment. There is a delicacy in this process that requires listening. The blockage is never a mistake. It is a reminder that creation needs integral coherence, thought, emotion, and body emitting the same signal. As long as there is misalignment among these three centers, the image fragments. But when there is tuning, even the faintest of thoughts gains the power to manifest. Doubt and control are two sides of the same coin. Both arise from a lack of trust in the field and in yourself. To trust is not to expect immediate results. It is to sustain the vibrational state regardless of time. It is to keep emitting the same frequency even when the reflection has not yet appeared. This is the point at which the field begins to reorganize in silence. And it is in this silence that something extraordinary happens. When you release the effort and return to pure vibration, the field responds with almost imperceptible synchronicities. Small signs, gentle coincidences, unexpected encounters. All of them are echoes of a new alignment being recognized. You realize that the blockage was never an absence of power, but an invitation to coherence. To visualize is not an isolated act, it is a continuous dialogue. And each time you keep it clean, without the noises of doubt or control, communication with the field becomes more precise. It is as if the universe breathed with you, inhaling what you emit and exhaling the reflection in the form of reality. At this point, the blockage dissolves, and what once seemed like an obstacle reveals itself as part of the learning to see clearly. This is the instant when imagination ceases to be an image in the mind and begins to become tangible energy. What was once an inner vision starts to generate physical sensation, organic movement. It is emotional alignment that converts thought into active vibration. When emotion unites with the image, the field receives the complete message, not as a request, but as a state of being. Imagination alone is too light to mold the real. It needs the density of feeling to acquire form. It is feeling that gives body to the invisible, that transforms intention into frequency. When you truly feel what you imagine, the vibration gains mass, becomes present, almost palpable. The body reacts. There is a subtle expansion, a vibration under the skin, a stillness that is not the absence of movement, but total presence. It is the sign that alignment has begun. This alignment cannot be forced. It is born from a silent meeting between what you think you want and what your field is truly ready to sustain. The mind can desire anything, but the body only vibrates with what it recognizes as true. Therefore, emotion is the thermometer. If, when visualizing something, there is lightness, peace, and serene enthusiasm, it is because there is coherence. If there is tension, anxiety, or effort, the image has not yet found its natural frequency. Most people try to create from the mind, and that is why manifestations get lost in the air. The mind draws, but it is emotion that prints. It is emotion that translates the idea into vibration, that lights up the field like a beacon. When feeling and thinking become a single impulse, reality begins to move toward the image, because the universe recognizes in it a complete signal. This state can be described as a fusion between presence and imagination. You still know you are in the now, but the body begins to react as if the visualized scene already existed. The muscles relax, the breath deepens. There is a sense of familiarity with what has not yet happened. This is the body vibrating at the frequency of what is being created, and when the body vibrates, the field hears. There is an essential difference between emotion and feeling that becomes clear at this point. Emotion is the raw movement of energy, the initial impulse. Feeling is the refined, stable vibration sustained over time. Emotional alignment is the moment when the initial emotion, often excited or intense, matures into a calm and enduring feeling. It is the stage in which creation ceases to depend on enthusiasm and comes to exist by natural resonance. To reach this point, it is necessary to learn to feel with precision. It is not about forcing joy or enthusiasm, but about finding the emotion that corresponds to the truth of what is desired. Sometimes the most powerful frequency is not ecstasy, but serenity. Aligned emotion does not shout, it sustains. And it is in this vibrant silence that the field recognizes the signature of coherence. The body is the first to signal when there is tuning. It becomes lighter, movements become fluid, small tensions dissolve. The body's vibration is like a radar of the soul. When it is in harmony, everything around responds. Sounds seem sharper, time seems to slow down, and a subtle clarity settles in. It is the field beginning to return the emission. At this point, imagining is no longer a mental act, it is a sensory state. You do not see something, you feel it happening within and around you. It is a complete experience in which vision, emotion, and perception blend. And the more natural this state becomes, the easier it is to maintain it without effort. Creation begins to happen continuously, like an electric current that does not need to be switched back on at every moment. Emotional alignment also reveals the cyclical nature of creation. There are moments of expansion. When the vibration grows, the image strengthens, and the field seems to respond quickly. And there are moments of contraction, when everything goes quiet and nothing seems to move. But even in this silence, energy is being consolidated. It is like the interval between one breath and another. The air is still there, just changing form. Accepting this natural rhythm is part of alignment. Resisting silence is to interrupt the flow. Welcoming it is to deepen it. When you understand that the field also works in the pauses, you begin to trust the process as a living organism. Alignment ceases to be an event and becomes a continuous state, a way of being in the world in which feeling and thinking have become a single gesture. There comes a moment when aligned emotion reaches such coherence that the entire body becomes an emitting antenna. The surrounding field responds almost immediately, as if each thought already came accompanied by the corresponding reality. This is not a miracle, it is a vibrational consequence. The universe makes no distinction between internal and external energy. It only reflects the strength and purity of the emission. This is the transition in which the creator ceases to be a dreamer and becomes a conscious emitter. Imagination ceases to be an escape and becomes an instrument of connection. The field, once perceived as something distant, reveals itself as intimate, like a natural extension of your own body. The air around you seems to take part in the same rhythm, breathing with you. And in this state, understanding becomes unnecessary. Intellectual knowing gives way to direct perception. Emotional alignment is not something explained, it is something felt. It is the instant when the universe ceases to be a setting and becomes a living presence that responds to the touch of your vibration. From there, imagination no longer seeks to transform the world. It is the very movement of the world recognizing itself in you. At this point, something silent happens. The body awakens, not as a separate instrument, but as the surface where the invisible becomes visible. Every creation needs an anchoring point, and the body is that point. It is the bridge between the field and matter, the sensory translator of the energy you emit. When the inner vibration stabilizes, the body begins to act as a living antenna, capturing and transmitting subtle information from the field. Each cell vibrates in tune with the pattern of consciousness you sustain. Visualization ceases to be merely a mental experience and becomes a bodily practice. You not only see the new reality, you feel it pulsing in your hands, in your breathing, in the beat of your heart. Consciousness expands into the flesh. The simple act of inhaling becomes a quantum data exchange between you and the field. The air that enters is not just oxygen, but information. Each breath contains the vibrational signature of what you are emitting in that instant. That is why the body reacts before the mind. It is the first to perceive the alignment or misalignment between what you think and what you feel. When there is coherence, the body becomes light, agile, present. The energy circulates without resistance. You feel integrated, whole, as if the space around you were also breathing within you. When there is disconnection, the body warns with subtle signs: tension, fatigue, cold in the extremities, weight in the back. The body never lies, because it is the physical echo of the field. Learning to listen to it is learning to read vibration in real time. This bodily listening is one of the purest forms of reconnection. It is neither rational nor mystical. It is biological. Each sensation carries vibrational data. The heat that arises when you are moved, the goosebumps that accompany a true perception, the calm that sets in after a coherent decision, all of this is the body translating frequencies. It is the mirror of the field, and the field, the mirror of the body. Therefore, deep visualization does not happen only with eyes closed, but on the skin, in the muscles, in the inner rhythm. The true image is not seen, it is felt. It is as if the whole body became a lens that projects to the field the shape of what it wishes to emit. The more aware you become of this process, the more you realize that the body is not a spiritual obstacle, but a vibrational portal. In moments of full coherence, there is a clear sensation of expansion. The body seems to occupy more space, time seems to dilate. This sensation is not illusory, it is physical. Studies on cardiac coherence and brain resonance show that when emotion and thought come into sync, The body's electromagnetic field expands, becoming more ordered and stable. The vibration becomes intelligible to the universe, and the universe responds. The body is the most precise emitter there is. It records each emotion as a vibrational log and repeats it until you decide to reprogram the pattern. That is why the emotional alignment we spoke of earlier needs to be felt here, within the cells. When the body believes, the field recognizes. It is not about convincing the mind, but about allowing the body to experience the new frequency. One of the most direct ways to anchor visualization is conscious touch. When creating an inner image, touch your chest, your abdomen, or simply breathe with presence, feeling the air pass through. This simple gesture sends the body the message that what is being imagined is real, and the body begins to vibrate accordingly. Touch and breathing are like quantum switches. They turn on the creation circuit. But it is important to understand that the body is not only an emitter, it is also a receiver. The field constantly sends responses, and the body translates them into sensations. A slight pressure at the nape, a tingling, a sudden expansion of heat. These are signs that the field is interacting, returning information. The dialogue happens all the time, but it is rarely heard. When you become sensitive to these subtleties, communication becomes vivid, intimate, almost personal. Bodily awareness opens space for a new kind of perception, that the field is not outside you, but extends from you. The body and the field are a single vibrational continuity, two densities of the same presence. Therefore, taking care of the body is taking care of the frequency. Food, sleep, breathing, movement, all of these are ways to calibrate the antenna. When the body is clean, the field reflects clearly. It is in this state of coherence that reality begins to respond in an almost immediate way. Coincidences increase. Decisions become more precise. The right people appear. There is no magic in this, only resonance. Inner clarity creates outer clarity. The body vibrates what the field understands as instruction, and the universe simply reflects the instruction faithfully. You begin to notice that each sensation is a conversation, that the body is not at the service of the mind, but of the field, that each heartbeat is an emission, and each pause a listening. It is the point where the spiritual and the physical merge. The body, once seen as a limit, becomes the means of expansion. It is the tangible language of consciousness. And perhaps the most beautiful part of this perception is understanding that tuning requires no effort, only presence. The body knows the way. It always has. The mind doubts, but the body remembers. And the more you listen to it, the simpler creation becomes. A constant exchange between you and the whole, a dance in which each breath is a gesture of creation. If this understanding touched something in you, let it vibrate beyond the reading. Breathe deeply and perceive the field now while the body reads these words. Feel the vibration move in silence. And if something inside you recognized this truth, manifest this frequency. Like this video as an act of vibrational anchoring and write in the comments the phrase, "My body is my antenna," so that the field may read, through your intention, the confirmation that you have chosen to align. This simple gesture is more than an interaction. It is a way of sustaining the scene. Creation consolidates when vibration is maintained with presence and not merely evoked for an instant. The power of silent persistence is born from this state of continuity, when the inner image ceases to be an effort of imagination and becomes a living memory being repeated until the field recognizes it as real. The mind tends to confuse persistence with insistence. To insist is to act from lack. To persist is to remain in the frequency of what already exists. The difference is vibrational. When you insist, there is tension. When you persist, there is constancy. The field does not respond to passing intensity, but to the stability of the emission. It is the sustained coherence that teaches it to reflect the new information until it becomes part of concrete reality. Sustaining the scene is not keeping the thought fixed. It is keeping the vibrational state that the thought represents. This requires inner silence, not effort. Silence is not the absence of sound, but the absence of vibrational noise, that noise that arises when doubt tries to interrupt coherence. True persistence is silent because it does not need to reaffirm anything, it simply emits. Imagine a string vibrating in the air. As long as the tension is stable, the sound is pure. If the touch hesitates or the hand presses too much, the sound is lost. That is how the field works. It responds to continuous vibration, not intermittent impulse. Each time you return to the same frequency with calm and presence, reality shapes itself a bit more. It is a process of vibrational sedimentation, layer after layer, until the invisible becomes inevitable. There is a discipline in this serenity. Silent power is not measured by effort, but by the ability to remain in coherence even in the face of the absence of immediate signs. The impatient mind seeks constant confirmation, but the field operates in rhythms that human logic does not perceive. Energy needs time to reorganize probabilities, and that time is the space in which faith becomes vibrational science. Persistence is, therefore, a form of conscious faith. Not blind faith that ignores reality, but lucid faith that understands the invisible is also part of the real. It is trust in a process that moves at the level of frequencies before manifesting in form. This trust is built little by little, through observing the small signs, coincidences, synchronicities, changes in bodily sensation that indicate the field is responding. Maintaining the vibration does not mean remaining motionless. It is possible to act and at the same time sustain the frequency. Coherent action is a natural extension of the emission. When the body moves in alignment with the vibration being sustained, each gesture reinforces the information in the field. Persistence then ceases to be a mental effort and becomes a way of living. There is a kind of strength that only arises from silence. It is a clean strength, without anxiety, without haste. It does not need to prove anything. It merely keeps the rhythm. When you remain in this state, the field reorganizes organically, as if the universe were adjusting its contours to reflect the new pattern you sustain. It is at this point that reality begins to bend, discreetly, to the coherence of your vibration. The mind tends to give up before the field completes the cycle. That is why many creations disintegrate in the middle of the process. The field needs stability, and each time the vibration is interrupted, the cycle restarts. To persist is to let time act in your favor. It is to keep the signal emitted until the mirror returns the whole image. Silent persistence is also a form of vibrational humility. It is the recognition that you do not control the field, but collaborate with it. That creation is not the result of force, but of continuity. It is the same principle that moves nature, the drop that falls on the stone, the wind that shapes the sand, the sun that ripens the seed. Nothing happens out of haste. Everything happens by repetition of frequency. When you understand this, you realize that reality is not created all at once, but reveals itself little by little, like a photograph emerging in the developing fluid. The field adjusts, and the world around you begins to give signs, situations, encounters, intuitions. Each of them is a fragment of the larger reflection, an indication that persistence is generating form. There is beauty in sustaining the vibration without demanding a result. It is in this space of trust that the field recognizes constancy as truth. Truth does not need proof, only time to be perceived, and when the vibration remains stable long enough, the universe has no choice but to reflect it. This is the point at which creation consolidates. When you no longer wait, you simply know. Waiting carries absence, knowing carries presence. To persist is to remain knowing. Knowing that the emitted vibration is not lost, that the field records each emission, and that everything maintained in coherence inevitably finds its form. Reality is an echo of persistence, and persistence is the sign of energetic maturity, the stage in which the creator stops testing the field and begins to converse with it as an equal. In this continuous dialogue, time ceases to be an obstacle and becomes an ally. The field recognizes the rhythm of one who has learned to sustain, and the reflection becomes inevitable. To sustain the scene is to remain in it until the universe recognizes it. And when it does, reality gently bends to reflect what you have maintained in silence. It is at this moment that something begins to change in an almost imperceptible way. The world becomes sharper. Small coincidences, unlikely encounters, sudden intuitions. Everything seems aligned by an intelligence that operates behind appearances. These are the first signs of opening, the silent confirmation that the field has begun to respond. These signs rarely arrive in a spectacular way. They manifest in subtlety, a delay that makes you avoid an accident, a thought that precedes a message, a look that recognizes before it understands. The field begins to communicate through synchronicities, those invisible stitches that unite events separated in time and space. It is not magic, it is vibrational coherence becoming perceptible. When the vibration stabilizes, reality reorganizes around it. It is as if the timelines became malleable, adjusting to accommodate the frequency you have begun to emit. Time, which once seemed fixed, gains elasticity. Hours lengthen or contract according to your inner state. In moments of full presence, it slows down. In distractions, it speeds up. The field responds to your attention, and time is one of its modes of expression. This malleability is the first indication that you are beginning to see the world with the eyes of the field. The boundaries between inside and outside become porous. You notice that answers arrive before questions, that intuition precedes reasoning. It is not a supernatural gift, but a frequency adjustment. When the body, emotion, and mind enter coherence, perception naturally expands. You begin to pick up what was always present, but previously went unnoticed. Intuition is the field's direct language. Unlike thought, it does not argue, it simply shows. It arises as instant knowing, a clarity that needs no justification. At first, the mind tries to doubt. It looks for proof, confronts with logic. But over time, you learn to recognize the texture of intuition. It is calm. It does not push or demand. When it comes, everything aligns around it, as if the universe held its breath for an instant to confirm the direction. These expanded perceptions are more bodily than mental. Sometimes intuition comes as a slight chill at the nape, a tingling in the hands, an expansion in the chest. These are physical signs that the body has picked up vibrational information before thought translates it. The mind usually calls it coincidence, but the field knows it is tuning. The more you trust this kind of perception, the stronger it becomes. Attention is the fuel of intuition. Over time, the world begins to seem more alive. Colors appear more intense, sounds more defined, pauses fuller of meaning. This increase in perception is not imagination. It is the field showing itself more clearly. You begin to notice subtle patterns, numbers that repeat, recurring symbols, themes that return in different conversations. They are vibrational echoes. Each repetition is a reminder from the field saying, "You are on the right path." But it is important to understand that these signs are not rewards. They do not arise to prove anything, but to guide. When the field opens, it does not do so to impress, but to communicate. The universe speaks the language of coherence. The more you align, the more the dialogue intensifies. This constant communication is what many call flow. It is the state in which everything seems to move with ease, as if the world were breathing along with your inner rhythm. However, it is easy to get lost in this phase. The mind may try to appropriate the signs, turning them into a system, into control. When this happens, the vibration closes. The field does not respond to the desire for power, but to the purity of presence. Therefore, upon noticing the signs, the most important thing is to give silent thanks and move on. Gratitude is the simplest way to keep the channel open. It tells the universe, "I receive, I understand, I trust." Another change that becomes noticeable at this stage is the way time behaves in the face of intention. What once took months seems to happen in days. What once required effort unfolds naturally. This occurs because the field already recognizes the vibration as constant. Reality no longer needs resistance to be shaped, because you are already sustaining the pattern you use to try to reach. Time ceases to be an obstacle and becomes an extension of consciousness. There are moments when this expansion of perception can feel too intense. Emotions widen, synchronicities multiply, and the mind feels dizzy in the face of so much precision. In these moments, it is essential to return to the body. Physical anchoring prevents the field from becoming a whirlwind. Just breathe deeply, feel your feet on the ground, and remember that the body is the center of emission. Thus, the dialogue remains balanced. With practice, this sensitivity becomes natural. You no longer need to seek signs, they simply appear as part of the fabric of life. Communication with the field becomes something every day, a look that finds answers, a silence that brings understanding. The world ceases to be a stage and becomes a continuous conversation. This is the true opening, not an extraordinary phenomenon, but a state of constant listening. When the field becomes transparent, time bends in favor of consciousness, and intuition becomes the natural way of living. You realize that there is no chance, only resonance. The invisible and the visible dance together, and you are the tempo of this dance. Silent persistence has brought you here, and the field begins to show that it recognizes your vibration. The expanded perceptions, the malleable time, and the precise intuitions are not powers, but reminders that you are awake. The universe responds because finally there is someone listening. And from this listening, reality begins to reveal another layer, one where inner seeing becomes direct experience and the invisible manifests as part of everyday life. At this point, you are no longer imagining the field, you perceive it. It becomes as evident as the sound of your breathing. What was once a hypothesis becomes a tangible sensation. The separation between visualizing and experiencing dissolves, and consciousness enters a state in which inner seeing and outer seeing blend like two faces of the same perception. The expansion of quantum abilities does not happen suddenly. It unfolds gently as the observer becomes more transparent. It is not the mind that gains new powers, it is perception that widens. It is as if you began to see with your entire body. Presence becomes a living lens, and the world around reacts to it with an almost unheard-of precision. When inner seeing matures, it ceases to be controlled imagination and becomes direct experience of energy. Visualizations gain texture. It is possible to feel the weight of what you imagine, the density of an emotion, the subtle movement of an intention crossing space. The field, which once seemed ethereal, becomes concrete. You feel it in your hands, in your chest, on your skin. Energy ceases to be a concept and reveals itself as living substance. This perception profoundly changes how you live time. The now expands, filling the spaces where anxiety once was. The future ceases to be an expectation and becomes a vibrational direction. The past, once fixed, reveals itself as malleable, not as memory but as a frequency that can be reconfigured by present consciousness. Inner seeing allows you to revisit memories and cleanse them, adjusting the vibration that still repeats within them. Thus, the future no longer carries the weight of what was not integrated. A kind of clarity is born from this expansion. It is the clarity of one who perceives that everything is moving in response to what one emits, and that nothing lies outside the field of creation. The boundaries between what is internal and what is external lose meaning. The same impulse that generates a thought also moves a leaf in the wind. Everything responds to the vibration of consciousness. This perception does not need to be extraordinary to be real. It manifests in small things, in how the body feels someone's proximity, in the precision of an intuitive choice, in the synchronicity of a word that arrives at the exact moment it was needed. These are moments in which consciousness recognizes itself, acting through reality itself. When inner seeing becomes direct experience, the separation between emitter and receiver disappears. You realize that you are not observing the field, but being observed by it. Creation becomes reciprocal. The universe looks back, and in this mutual gaze, there is recognition. You and the field perceive each other as a single organism breathing in different densities. This expansion requires no effort, only availability. The field does not need to be hunted or proven. It needs to be felt. And feeling happens when the mind stops trying to translate. There is a point at which thought bows before perception, and silence becomes the natural channel of experience. In this silence, the hidden abilities, intuition, energetic sensitivity, perception of time and matter cease to be hidden. They become evident, not as powers, but as natural functions of awakened consciousness. It is at this stage that perception begins to operate on multiple levels. You can be present in a conversation and at the same time feel the field moving around. Subtle flows of energy, changes of density in the environment, micro-reactions in the body. Everything becomes living information, and this reading happens without analysis, like immediate understanding. Consciousness becomes multisensory, expanding beyond physical limits without abandoning the body. Many call this energetic vision, but perhaps it is more accurate to call it integrated perception. It is the point at which you stop interpreting the world and begin to perceive it as it is. A weave of vibrations interlacing and responding to your presence. The boundaries between you and the environment disappear. The touch of a surface, a distant sound, the warmth of the sun, everything becomes part of the same field of continuous consciousness. With this integration, the abilities once called quantum become natural. Intuition refines itself to the point of guiding actions with almost mathematical precision. Empathy expands, allowing you to feel what the other feels without becoming confused with them. Creativity ceases to be a search and becomes spontaneous flow. Communication with the field becomes as natural as breathing. It is important to understand that these abilities are not goals, but consequences of coherence. They bloom when the inner noise quiets and consciousness stabilizes. Seeking them is what drives them away. Allowing them to arise is what reveals them. When inner seeing becomes stable, the invisible manifests as a natural extension of perception. What was practice becomes state. And in this state, you realize it has always been so. That the field was never distant, that the abilities were never hidden, only covered by the noise of haste and doubt. Expansion is not an achievement, it is an unveiling, the remembering of what was already true before it was forgotten. Inner seeing then becomes the original gaze of creation. Everything that exists is perceived from within, and the external world reveals itself as a reflection of a consciousness that has finally learned to see itself in all directions. It is from this point that fusion with the creative field becomes inevitable. The moment when the observer ceases to project reality and begins to emanate it, not as an act of will, but as the natural expression of being itself. In this state, everything that exists becomes an extension of what you are. Creation no longer happens through the effort of imagining, but through the simple fact of existing in coherence. The field and consciousness cease to be two poles and become a single pulse breathing in unison. Life then reveals itself as a continuous current of emission and reception, a movement of love in the form of energy. Nothing is separate, and everything responds to the vibration you sustain. Choices become intuitive, time flows in harmony, and presence becomes the universal language. You no longer need to visualize what you desire. You need only remain being what you wish to emit. Fusion with the field is the return to origin. It is realizing that there was never a distance between creator and creation, only forgetfulness. When this remembrance awakens, the world ceases to be something you try to understand and becomes something that vibrates in sync with your consciousness. The real becomes transparent, and the invisible familiar. If you have come this far, it is because something in you recognized this calling. Write in the comments, "I emanate the field," so that this vibration may be established and the universe may read your intention. And if you felt that this content resonated with your journey, subscribe and remain in this space, where each word is a reflection of what already lives in you, ready to be remembered.